So most likely you guys know this by now, that there are 4 basic fundamental types of human. That does not mean we're trying to put anybody in a box. It's just giving us our basic foundation for our type, strategy, and authority. Now on this slide, we have broken out the generator and manifesting generator because those are really important subtypes of generator and they operate very differently. But the strategy is still the same, the auric frequency is still the same, and that's why we still say there's 4 types, even though you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this slide. Now, in the human design community, there are a lot of people who have gone off and done their own thing, taken a few classes, or maybe a lot of classes, maybe early on with Ra, and they went off to create their own system, and they count the manifesting generator as a 5th type. Sorry, manifesting generator is one of the core fundamental pieces that came out of the reflector. So I'm gonna go like this for you. Reflector first, and then out of the reflector we had manifesting generator, which birthed the generator manifestor energies, and then last but not least we have the projector. So these 2 auric frequencies, as far as their open enveloping aura, are still the same in that their frequency is magnetic, it pulses out and it draws things into it to respond to. So remember, human design is a system that just gives you the available energy to recognize how you're here to make decisions that you can trust for yourself. And the core foundational piece of that Ross synthesized from the material he was given is type, strategy, and authority. Even at the end of his years of decades of bringing this system out into the world, he still said his primary message was type. And that was not given to him by the voice as far as him getting this knowledge. It was him being available to see the patterns, to put the foundation down, to give people a tool, a technique for making decisions that they can trust. So you might even find some people out there teaching a version of human design that Ra taught before he synthesized types. And that's okay. Remember to follow your strategy and authority into whatever it is that's going to give you the best benefit. It's your experiment. Trust yourself first. Don't take anybody's word for it. Experiment with it and see for yourself how well it works for you, if it works for you. And hopefully, if you get the correct alignment or attunement to the right people, it'll come down to you through the fractal line, we call it, meaning us being connected to each other. We all have different available paths to receive information from other people. Human design, like Vedic astrology, like many of the ancient wisdoms, they're passed down through voice. They're passed down from person to person, which is why we still at Human Design, our standard industry, IHDS and such, we still recommend that you do live sessions with people so that you can attune to the conversation, the frequency, really get where you're coming from here. So I'm hopeful that I'm going to clarify a lot of misidentification and confusion if you haven't been studying Ra's system, because there's a lot of people out there, more and more by the day, who are taking the system, making their own spin on it, using different keynotes, using different language, making up stuff that isn't true to the system because what they're saying is incongruent with what the system actually says. And the problem is, it's not that they're bad or wrong, the problem is they're still calling it human design, and then they're certifying people, which is really painful to hear and to see. And I get a lot of students from those people. Ra would call them the black marketeers, the people who went off and did their own thing. So now let's talk a bit about these types. Remember, within each of the types, there are many subtypes. Here, we're showing you subtypes because this by far is the largest portion of our population. So it is helpful for us to separate those subtypes out to tell you the basic fundamental differences within these subtypes. However, the most complex of all the types happen to be the projector, and there are 3 basic fundamental subtypes, and then beyond that, even more, because of the variations of the authority. Authority really is where it's at. with all of this, but when we have projectors with so many different variations, the newest kind, the most complex kind of human that was beginning to be born in 1781, so it wasn't that long ago, we do have at deeper foundational levels more information to help projectors hone into their own unique truth. And of course, manifestors, we have multiple different kinds of manifestors depending on the authority. And of reflectors, only being 1.5% of the population, I have yet to see, subtypes of reflectors. My imagination, in taught anywhere, my imagination lends me to, there's incarnation crosses, and some of them are generator gates, and some of them are manifestor gates, and, there's all kinds of stuff underneath the surface you could look at. But in this course, we're going to stay at the surface because the most important thing that Ra gave us were these very, very simple keys. If I can keep it to the simple and distill it down to its basic, fundamental, most important things to understand, you are more likely to be successful with the information. And remember, you can't get this wrong, because let's say you mistake. I'm going to give you one of the most common mistakes, and I'm saying that on purpose that way, not as in bad or wrong, but as in, imagine a clapperboard, like when you're filming a movie. Take one, take two. Mistake, as in, let's do it over again. And the mistake, third line errors, trial and error, is the material way. It is the way to success. When you make a mistake with your experiment, those are the places where you really learn a lot. You learn a lot. I'll talk more about my learnings next week when we talk about projectors. But common mistake, okay, here, oh my goodness. I saw a post recently on Instagram where this woman was saying, generators, are you manifesting generators? Manifesting generators. Are you allowing yourself to be spontaneous with no apology? Sorry, not all manifesting generators are designed to be spontaneous. No. So it's important to recognize when they say wait for a response, my dear generator friends, it's not sit on the couch and do nothing. It's use your energy correctly for you according to your available energy. You have available energy to respond. What can these 4 types do? Respond, can impact or manifest, can guide, be available as an advisor to the right people, can reflect and be objective and observant with the reflectors. So on this next slide, I'm going to point out the strategies. Remember, this is a reminder from our very first class that we did together, my free, introduction to human design for the basic fundamental newcomer. And for these 4 basic types, we have 4 strategies, as you can see here on the slide. Remember, wait to respond. The response is where it's at. And your whole life movie, generator friends, is about who are you for yourself. That spiraling in of the energetic availability that is coming to you, drawn to you, because you are like a magnet. The energy that is pulsating out of you is the largest auric field that we have, and it's drawing people to you for you to respond to. It's drawing you forward. There's a movement of energy within your body that pulls you or rises up. You can feel it. When you feel yourself sink, when you feel yourself contract, when you feel like there's a block or a wall in front of you, stop trying to push through that wall. That's what brings the frustration and anger. Why are you pushing through the wall? Because your mind is still driving you rather than you surrendering to the form and the power of your form to make an informed decision. Availability of energy. Who are you for yourself is what I want you to remember. Now on this slide, I'm just going to focus on manifestor. We'll talk about these guys next week. Informing before you act is a synthetic strategy for the manifestor. It's not natural. Unlike the generator, who has a response mechanism that gives them the available energy to discover who they are for themselves. The informing in order to impact is the way that I like to hear it described from Genoa Bliven, who is a manifestor at Human Design America. I've done a lot of really amazing courses over the years, and that's one of the things that I found was most powerful, most helpful for me to convey to you, for the manifestor friends. We're not in this class, but if you know any manifestors, it's important that they inform those who are impacted so that they can move through life without anger and find the peace. Find the peace or the satisfaction is the essence of the spirit that arises from within you when you are in alignment with your truth. So the most important thing to remember, we just took multiple weeks going through all of those centers, aligning you to recognizing why it's important to experiment with strategy and authority. If you found yourself on the unhealthy state of any of those defined or undefined slides, not to worry. There's a solution. And the solution is strategy. It is the mechanical implementation of strategy that changes the way you make decisions. And if you make a mistake, whoops, I forced the energy rather than waiting to respond. That's a signpost. When the frustration and anger shows up, signpost, off track. Rather than going off track and continuing to go off track, take a deep breath, stop. Wait for the energy to respond. What is your body responding to? And now basically, I want to speak to this real briefly, and I'll reiterate it because it's so important. It's not about somebody specifically having to go to you and say, can you, could you? Although that can be very helpful. It is your available body and its energetic recognition of the conditions, circumstances, events, people, places, what have you. Your presence that is interfacing with reality. So when reality shows you a beautiful sunny sky and there's birds chirping and singing, and you're looking around at your messy house going, God, mom and dad are coming over later today, but my body really wants to go for a walk. You go for a walk. You don't worry about the house being messy. Who cares what they think? Do what you love for you. Who are you for you? Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. That's the most damaging thing that a generator will do, is try to get themselves in everybody else's life rather than, who am I for myself? Okay. I'm a little bit on a flow here. The auric types, I want to show you the energetic pulsing. You can see in this artist rendition is available energy that looks about the same as the other auras. Personally, I would go like this because there's a lot more connection that the generator aura. It's so magnetic, it's so large as a frequency field. Many of these gates have a very either magnetic or large frequency field. So they're going to be more available to the energetics of what the situation around them is providing. Now, if they have an undefined G, even more sensitive to place. Place and people, they're going to amplify. And there's no filtering mechanism for the generator. Two types that have a filtering mechanism: manifestor, the very dense, closed, the energy going inward here, inward. That's not what it says, but it's like this, the energy going, pushing outward, but staying very dense and close to the body. Okay, that's what the energetic presence of a manifestor is: closed, dense, so it has an impact. They are not aware of their impact, and they have this, innovation that potentially, or initiation that potentially can happen when they're operating in alignment, and they inform first it softens the blow. It softens the potential backlash, because manifestors are not here to be controlled, and yet that's the problem that I see most often, is their power has been taken away from childhood because other people attempt to control what they sense cannot be controlled. And so in an attempt to discipline or teach this child how to behave, their spirit gets broken. I should say it a different way, because that's applied to a different place in the design. Their, whatever it is that makes them the manifestor, their strength, potentially. Their strength is not able to align to what they need to do because other people from childhood, think about a little child, first 7 years is when the most heavily conditioned you are. So your parents primarily attempt to dominate and control. Let's say they're amplifying that person's energy. So they really pressurize that kid. And these are the rebellious kids that, get really, really angry. So now that's a dense, very closed aura. We'll come back to these next week in depth. But reflector 2 has a bit of a reflective, protective shield. And that was my point here. This is not a protective shield. So it's imperative that the generator aligns to its strategy of waiting for response, because it has no protective shield like the manifestor or the reflector. Okay? Now I see a comment here. His power, Tiffany is saying, my partner is a manifestor. His power was shamed so that he would stifle it himself. And what I tend to see with manifestors, I've known way more than reflectors in person in my life. And what I tend to see with manifestors is the power gets buried within. So they turn that anger within on themselves if they're very sensitive, if they have any other stream of sensitivity, or it goes out and it's very misunderstood. So we're going to begin briefly with the manifestor. Briefly, I say, because I don't want to spend too much time here. I want to spend more time with your generator information. So if you do have a manifestor in your life, our strategy for raising that manifestor correctly is to teach them to ask permission as a youth, but as they grow older, to give them more and more responsibility to begin to inform, and to do it in a way that is about just keeping those who need to know apprised of what's going on. Because the density of the aura has such impact. If the manifestor can be given the responsibility, particularly this one in this case, the responsibility of more and more requirement for themselves to have their independence, then it's much more likely that they're going to grow up in a healthy way. So asking permission, even though it sounds like, wait a minute, it's about leaving the repercussions of this powerful being from getting punished if they can ask permission first, rather than just doing what they want to do, they know they can do because they're manifestors. Teaching them, giving them responsibility at greater and greater levels as they get older, and then as an adult, informing. So the not self theme here, if they are not operating in alignment, meaning they've made decisions out in the openness, then what tends to happen is their anger is the predominant thematic. Remember, any of the not self themes are not bad or wrong. They are big flashing red lights that say you've gone off track. So they're actually a wonderful gift. It's a gift to recognize your bitterness, your anger, your frustration, your disappointment, because it lets you know a signpost of whether or not you're on track or off track. Your mechanics of a manifestor is always never going to have the sacral center defined, because they are non-sacral beings. However, because there is a motor, in this case the root center, defined to the throat, then we have someone who can manifest, meaning energy manifested. So there are many different ways to create a manifestor. As long as the energy directly reaches the throat and there is no sacral center, you have a manifestor on your hands. Again, the auric frequency field is closed and repelling, very dense. And if you could just give them one question to help align them to their truth, it is, consider your impact. How do you impact? What is your impact? Is this the impact that you intend? Is this the impact that you want to have? It depends on the kind of definition that we're looking at as far as how I would language that. The concern also could be, will I be answered? Because manifestors are here to get the ball rolling. They're here to start things. They're here to innovate. They're here to initiate, inform in order to impact, in order to initiate things into the world. As an example, we have Ra, who initiated the human design system. The signature and goal, or the spirit. And yeah, actually, I was saying that their spirit could be broken. As a child who's being very, very subjugated to other people's needs and desires and wants, and not allowed the freedom, because manifestors are looking for freedom. Everyone aren't they, to be themselves? But particularly manifestors need that freedom. the signature of their life in its aligned state is operating in peace, a deep, deep, deep overarching sense of peace. And if you watch Ra Uru Hu in the beginning of his teaching career in the early 90s, and then you watch him in the later part of his teaching career, you can feel the peace emanating off of him in waves, how he, matured over his deconditioning process. It's so beautiful. Now, manifesting channels, there are lots, like I said, lots of ways. As long as we have no sacral center channels defined, we have energy. These are the direct ways that we could create a manifestor. Therefore, inherently, these channels have potential anger in them when they're thwarted, as well as potentially, one or the other, any of these gates potentially when they're thwarted. Now, when this motor, let's say as an adrenalized motor function coming up through the awareness center into the throat, adrenalized bitterness processing through awareness becomes anger as well when out of integrity or out of alignment. So the manifesting channels, direct manifestation, are in the dark blue. We have transitoriness, design of a jack of all trades, openness, design of a social or antisocial being, and money, a design of materialism. Okay, so there again we have the interaction. Manifestor, you can see it's not connecting, okay? Not connecting to the other. It has an impact. It pushes on people, and people may not know what they're dealing with. So in an attempt, because there's this very dense auric frequency field, an attempt to try and understand the manifestor, here's a generator trying to envelop the manifestor, not really feeling like it's getting enveloped in return, wondering what's going on. Why does that person feel so closed off to me? Why do they feel so powerful and yet restrained? The mind always trying to question, why do you feel like this when this other person feels like that? So you can tell we could have a whole class on this where we just talk about the interactions between types as far as what that does to the psychology, let's say, of little children who are looking for that from that parent, and yet that parent isn't available like the other parent who might have a different kind of aura. The interaction is different depending on also the definition, but in basic fundamental terms, a manifestor with the closed repelling aura feels like it's in its own shell, so it can feel very isolating. It can feel very misunderstood as a good, recognition of what this is like growing up. Because remember, these are only about 10% of the population, so not a lot of people are manifestors. And what most people, when they come to human design and they say, oh, there's a manifestor, ooh, why aren't I a manifestor? My husband, who found this like 3 years before I did, or we did again together, was like, this is bullshit. I'm not a projector. I'm a manifestor. So there's always this manifestor envy when you first come to the human design system, when you don't know what these terms mean and what they show up like. Once you decondition long enough, you don't have type envy anymore, because you love yourself and you love your type exactly as you are, and you can't imagine being anything different. So again, the thing to ask yourself, if you are a manifestor, who do you impact? If you can, make a list of the people that you will be impacted of your decision and keep them informed. It's helpful. And then reflect upon noticing recent decisions where you met resistance. Did you inform? The ongoing support that we recommend to manifestors is knowing how your design impacts others. You're an emotional manifestor. You emotionally manifest out of chaos, not of peace. Ooh, you know what that's going to do to other people who are in an undefined function, an undefined solar plexus. That is really important to understand or to grok. And knowing how others impact your design. Let's say you're a non-emotional manifestor and you're with an emotional generator, and that emotional generator is emotionally generating and you're getting touchy, nervous, defensive. It's really important to understand these basic fundamental type interactions, the way that it shows up. Now, the ongoing support and process, these places where we encourage you to move on. In the human design system, we have a path, and that next level of the class training, Rave ABCs, can help manifestors. Don't tend to find a lot of manifestors here in human design. First of all, they're rare. Second of all, they're usually just I'm really not concerned. If they can find out what their impact is, it can really reduce some of the resistance to keep people informed. So I'm going to tell you a little quick story. I got 2 minutes to tell you a story about Manifestor and why it's so important. It's a silly story. Hang on a second. But let's imagine we have a Manifestor husband and a projector, generator, any other kind wife. Okay, wife is at home. I'm going to do the classic, sorry, stereotypical, because it's easy to imagine and understand. But let's imagine wife is at home. She's making dinner. He's at home too because he just got home from work. But he sees her in the kitchen, thinks he has plenty of time to run down to the corner store and we're out of milk, grab some milk because he wants some milk with his rum or what have you, okay? So he leaves the house, goes down to the corner store, happens to be closed. So he has to go 3 more blocks down to the grocery store, gets the milk, comes back, and by this time she's fuming. Why? Because he didn't let her know, back before the age of cell phones, that he took off in order to get milk. So it's a very simple thing. It actually, and this is not regulated. Manifestors aren't the only ones who can keep people informed. Everybody can keep people informed of this kind of thing. But what tends to happen is because they can, they just do, because this is the realm of making stuff happen. They tend to just do, and people around them take it much more deeply and personally. And they don't understand it. So it's why it's important to ask permission when you're younger, train them to ask permission, and when older, to just keep people informed of the things that are really important for people to recognize or know. So that's where I'm going to shift gears now. We have a half an hour to talk to you about generators and manifesting generators. First thing I'm going to do is talk about how they're similar. Second is why they're so very different. And mechanically, it's very easy to see. First things first, we're going to look at the manifesting generator and generator. And now, again, please don't get confused. This is not a manifestor at all, period. Very different, exactly polar opposite as far as the frequency of how the auric vibrational field shows up. The strategy that we give to both of these subtypes, overarching type of the generator, is because this is the only center, sacral center in and of itself, the only center that immediately when you see it defined creates a type. So the type of being, because the sacral center is defined, means that there is a harmonic channeling of energy between one center and another center that creates a sound. These centers, none of them create a sound in and of themselves except for this generator sacral sound, non-vocal I'm talking, non-vocal sound when it's connected up to another center. Yummy food noise, all kinds of yummy sex noises, any kind of inarticulate, non-verbal noise you can think of, that actually gets generated by a generator because of this powerful vortex nature of this sacral center, as it's reverberating out and as it's, continually, constantly, having this influence of the life force in the channels, the energetic nature of the energy resource to respond is it just does. It has a sound. And when those children are little, before they can articulate, especially these poor pure generators, mommy and daddy go, use your words, rather than, allowing them to be cooing and gurgling and all the little baby noises. They try to teach them to verbalize and get them down the road to explain themselves. Explain why you're saying, Explain to me why you said no. Tell me why. And the moment that you try to get a generator to explain themselves, particularly a pure generator, let's say a non-emotional generator, they're going to learn to lie and try to make up excuses to validate their sounds when in fact it may not be knowable. All it is, that sacral mechanical response, is energy available to do this thing or not. Okay, energy available for this thing or not. That's why we give generators a strategy, the strategy of responding with your available energy. So, respond ability, the word respond ability, can respond when life asks of them. And one of the deepest experiences is going to be frustration, potentially anger with the manifesting generator, especially if they have one of the pure anger gates in the design from one of the pure manifesting channels. But the deep, deep, deep frustration, so deep that they have no idea that they're living in this constant field of frustration, that's the not self theme from a lifetime, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of trying to do what other people want of them rather than living their life as who am I for myself. Using their available energy to find what they're passionate about, to find what really lights them up. Instead, the mind goes, no, you got to do this in order to prove yourself because you don't want to upset that person in order to ensure your survival, and on and on and on. So remember with the mechanics of the generator, always, you see a sacral center. There is no such thing as a generator manifestor. That's something that somebody's out there teaching. There is only a generator that has either manifesting generator as a design or manifesting potential, because there are subtypes even of manifesting generators. We go more into that down the road to talk to you about the specificities of how definition shows up. But of course, both of these you can see sacral center defined. One of them has the energy reaching up to the throat. So that's not to say that there can't be, let's say, a split definition pure generator, pure sacral generator that has a throat center defined. It simply means that with the pure generators, the energy is not reaching up to the throat directly. Okay, so you can still see a defined pure generator. So the mechanics of the difference is that one has no motor connected to the throat for a pure generator, and one has a motor connected to the throat. Now, very big difference between the two. For in one respect, the pure sacral generator usually will need step-by-step process. This thing, then that thing, then the next thing in the journey, the next pattern or the next cycle, what have you, the next thing. Rather than skipping ahead, which is what the tendency of the manifesting generator tends to do. Skip ahead and then sometimes can go back and have to redo things because they might have messed things up a little bit. It's kind of like the tortoise and the hare story. I like to tell that one, in that, the generator is just plugging along, doing its thing, and that's the tortoise. And the hare can bounce off in so many different directions. It's much easier for a manifesting generator to be misaligned because they're so lightning quick. Sometimes they're so impatient. They just go and do things, especially if they're emotional and as a definition, as their authority. They really need to slow down. And here's my biggest recommendation to our manifesting generators. It's important that you wait for things to physically approach you first. Experiment with that. If you're emotional, of course, wait further for clarity. But physical manifestation of somebody actually approaching you or asking you a question, much more easy to stay on target, on track, than jumping ahead, skipping steps. That is part of your nature, but it's important to make sure that you're aligning to also your authority. So I love this mind too. Sammy, I'm so glad you said that. Sorry. Sammy and I have a manifesting generator child that is the same incarnation cross, just like a year, 3 years apart. So Sammy's telling a little story. I taught my manifesting generator baby sign language. Me too. He communicated through signs very young. Me too. Her first sign. She bolted up in bed and went like this. Milk. His sacral didn't reach the throat, doesn't reach the throat. His solar plexus is the motor that connects to his throat. Aha. He's 11 now, and when he responds, I watch for his sacral sounds and body language and trust that over what he might say. Milky's, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that, Sammy. So now let's take a look at this. These are the generated channels. So you can see we've got them colored in red because the sacral center is red. So they could be conscious or unconscious. But you can see that it's a very complex thing. So many different options that a sacral generator could have. So a generator is not a generator is not a generator, just like a channel is not a channel is not a channel. They are so freaking unique. You would be so surprised. You cannot look at the surface of a body graph and say, oh, this person's just like that person because they look alike. No, depends on the body graph, the database on either side. But these generated channels are where the life force of the energy resource, the availability to respond live. So it's the generator and its available energy. What was I wanting to say there? There was the available energy to respond that is must. In order for this energy to know whether or not something is appropriate, it has to have the response there. And sometimes you might find that, let's say they're very intelligent, and yet there's all this spontaneous energy, and when that energy isn't waiting for clarity, then stuff manifests that isn't potentially exactly what that person expected or wanted. So it's very helpful for all generators to have someone that can ask them a question. Now, with the emotional system, this is not as helpful because emotional generators need time to process things. But there is going to be a handout that I'm going to give you in the generator section with this recording that's called a sacral session. So I'm not talking to emotional generators anymore. I'm talking specifically to only these channels here that are pure sacral generated, okay? This was a example handout activity that was created by Marianne Winiger, who is a 6'2", left angle cross of the alpha, the very first woman to take Ra's new way of doing readings with type, strategy, and authority and actually put it into practice. She wrote a book, A Revolution of One. You can find it out there somewhere if you want to read it. It's very interesting. Anyway, she came up with this giant list of questions, yes/no questions, that are subdivided by area of life interest. So that is something that you can experiment with. Now, I gotta tell you a big old fat warning here. I have given this handout to people in my classes and watched as the next day their lives radically transformed. So what we say when we do sacral questions, and I actually might bring that out and maybe do some of that with you if you would like to see how it's done when we do work with your charts. But when you do the sacral questions, it needs to come from a place of authenticity and not just, rote. It has to be relevant to the person. So you're not going to go through that whole list of questions. You're just going to pick one segment that's really important or alive inside of that person right at that time. Okay? And now, we as projectors are not generators. There's two camps when it comes to how this sacral questions things work. I can remember when I first learned this in person, was when I really actually got to practice it. The third time I did LYD, I did it in person, and I sat with a triple split generator in front of me, and I had my hand on her leg. I don't know why. It was just part of the thing where I could feel through her response or not. It was something that we were just sitting out during one of the breaks, sitting out and experimenting with. And you can actually, as a non-sacral type, you can feel, I can feel the response inside of my body when it's got energy behind it or not energy behind it. So if you attempt to do this from an inauthentic place where you're just making up shit from your mind, you're going to find both of you are going to lose energy because it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be relevant. This is really about fine-tuning what is important, vital, and alive at this moment. So it's something that you can practice with. Now, so the two camps is, some people say, Non-sacral times, particularly projector, and I'll talk more to you about that later, are really good at this. However, a projector does not have the stamina as a fellow pure sacral generator does. So the most pure relationship that we have, according to Ra, as far as authentic, is the pure sacral generator partners who can ask each other yes, no questions back and forth until they find that true response. Okay. That's a really fun thing. We'll do that later, okay? After our little break. So again, the available energy of the generator and manifesting generator, for me personally, I would bring this much, much, much bigger and have it come right over here and go like that. It's enveloping. Do you guys know, I remember growing up in the 80s and 90s where we had giant parachutes that we would play out in the field with. You know, do you ever remember like putting the parachute out? Okay, so imagine this, like a parachute on the ground, this parachute right here. Clear. Okay, the parachute is going to be met with resistance over here by a manifestor. That parachute is going to go like this. It's not going to go into, penetrate into that manifestor. If that was a projector, that projector is going to penetrate right in, sink right in, while the generator just goes right around. That parachute just goes right around, and there's this spike of energy straight into the core of the other person. With a reflector, there's going to be this available energy to sample, and still this generator's trying to come around, and maybe some of it comes in, maybe some of it doesn't, but it's a very different thing. A generator and a generator are going to be open and enveloping with each other. So I'm hopeful that you're kind of getting a sense of what it means to be a type, the energetic availability of energy. I keep saying energy. The availability of the frequencies merging together. I want you to think porous here. Porous. So no shield, no filtering mechanism with generator. Therefore, it's very, very important that you watch your body's available energy for the interaction. If you start to pull away or shrink away, you can literally feel this in your body where you just sink down. Some generators, manifesting generators, describe it like a wall, like a glass, where you just can't get through. There's just nothing, you can't go through it because there's resistance there. There's no energy to move forward. Okay? So Tiffany is asking, I'm a manifesting generator. My partner is a manifester. We've been together 6 years and I still feel drunk on him. I would have to see his chart and yours in relationship to the two of you to really answer that question accurately. Most likely it's because of the dynamics of love gates and centers defined or not. Okay? What is that? It's life. It's attraction. We are attracted to what is different. In the future, we'll work with type energetics. Right now, we are still driven by our genetic inherent need to bond or mate with what is different. And the difference is attractive and magnetic in dynamic pairs, in relational pairs, and pair bonding. Okay, so remember the most important thing in order for you guys to recognize who you are for yourself is that your energy dictates who you are for yourself. Your generative frequency field, Ra would call you the great builders, because it really is about the fecundity of the human species, or the reproducibility of the human species to bond and to create more. That's what some of these core aspects of these channels are really all about. It is the, sexual reproductivity here. The ability to mate and to create life and to preserve and protect and take care of that life. So by design, you have available energy based on whatever your channel activations are to do that thing, to generate life, to create life, because that is your inherent, inherent genetic potential to create life. If we were to, I'm going to go over here. If we were to just rip out the sacral center and all of those channels there, we wouldn't have a human species. Everything else around it is in service to the generator frequency field. The generator, as Ra would call it, God's little children, the fortunate ones, the blessed ones, because you really are what moves this society, what generates our world, what creates our world, the life that we are living. Now, I just want to show you real briefly, if you look around this, we have all these projected channels. Everything here, projected channels, just sandwiching this generator life form. Here's a couple of manifestor channels that are designed to make an impact. But everything else, all these projected channels, what is the projector here for? To guide energy. So what tends to happen is that generators will usually have at least one, maybe more, but at least one projector in their life. Oftentimes, they're going to be very specific kinds of projectors depending on which channels that generator has. But it's a very happy and sometimes unhappy, but a very beautiful relationship that is needed by both. And I go deeper into that relationship between generators and projectors in one of the videos inside of our group here. Let me just show it to you. I'm pretty sure I put it in. I want to double check and make sure so I'm not misleading you. Courses. Pretty sure I put the video recording in, let's see, generators. Did I do it? Maybe not. Hang on. I might have been thinking of a different class. Okay, didn't. So there's an article here. I'm going to add class recordings. No. Should I put it here? I'll probably put it here. I'm going to add a little, I think it's in the presentation perhaps. No. That's in the presentation for my LYD guides. Okay, so it's LYD guides that I gave this to, but I want to give it to you guys too. This is projector generator interaction, okay? And the reason I'm doing this is because it's one of the most productive relationships and common relationships we're going to see in the dynamics between a generator and a projector because of the frequency of how they show up. One more piece and then I'll go round up the generator thing, topic. Okay. So because this is about 67% of the population, this is about 10, this is about 1.5, and this is about 22%, give or take a few percent, I'm rounding here by memory. You can look at jovianarchive.com resources and statistics to find the most current calculations. But in general, you can see most of the planet is generative. And remember how I was saying how the manifestor and the reflector have their own kind of protective energetic? The projector does not have a protective frequency field. It's intended to be conditioned. And it's like a lock and key. Right lock, right key, obviously. Not every projector is going to penetrate deeply into a generator, and definitely not every generator is going to want every projector to penetrate deeply into that generator. It can feel very painful for a generator to be projected, or what did I say? Projected into by the wrong projector, or when that generator is not available to be projected into. Example, I remember speaking to a beautiful generator woman in person who was just one sacral channel, emotional sacral channel, and the rest of her design was completely open. She had two projector parents, and both, she said it, she has an undefined G, both of them, projecting into trying to manage her, guide her. But when the sacral center is not available to respond, and they have no filter, there's no protective mechanism, all they have is their, available energy. And if that energy is violated by a projector who is not welcome, it can feel very uncomfortable to the generator. And imagine, this is, the most common relationship that we have. Now imagine that the generator, if it were aligned with its own power, being available to respond and following that response no matter what, that in this example, Brooks, no argument, and it's like a clamshell. No getting in. No getting in. If that generator is firm in their boundaries. But if they've been, abused potentially, or they're operating out of alignment, not self, they might let pushy people come in and project in and attempt to, people please. Either one. All people can do this, but either one. Really susceptible to this kind of dynamic. And so there's this love-hate kind of relationship between the two. Okay? And, thank you, Gurkhan, for sharing what you said. You said your wife is a manifestor. That's really what's going on between us. Yeah, back when we were talking about generator manifestor. Yeah, it's definitely something. Yeah, we're attracted to difference. And the difference, if you can understand the difference and honor the difference, not expect them to be like you are, but allow them to be what they are. It's so much better for both of you in the long run, the healthy relationships. Last piece, I'm going to give you the guidance on the ongoing process of the generator and manifesting generator, and then we'll take a break. Your process, if you are a generator, is to study yourself, because you are interested in who you are, and that's what's going to bring you on track. Not trying to study everybody else, but who are you for yourself? Study yourself. Again, taking the next course extends your available recognition of yourself so that you understand the mechanics behind what is showing up in your life, why you are the way that you are, and how you can live your life to the fullest. You don't need to know that information. All you need is type, strategy, and authority. However, if you're having problems disconnecting from the conditioning of the not self mind, it can be helpful to continue in your study if it's right for you. So your ongoing support, what I recommend is to make friends with people that you go through these classes with. If there's anybody that you feel really drawn to when you hear them talk, you really feel you're responding to them, you might reach out and actually talk about your experiment or your experience. It's particularly isolating in today's day and age because COVID-19, we don't have people in person. We're not doing in-person gatherings of human design stuff. It's all online. And so it can be very helpful to be with others of your kind who are also studying this material. Because in the beginning, people look at you crazy when you're only going, say you have an undefined throat, rather than saying yes or no. But that's your process, is to follow the gut response and not try to articulate or force explanations or words going up to the mind to try and rationalize or justify why you're doing what you're doing. Your response should brook no argument. If you're a spontaneous sacral generator, your response should brook no argument. It rings when it's alive and awakened. It rings like a great bell that tolls for miles and draws people into its available frequency field. So again, ongoing support, use of sacral sessions, that's what we're going to go into after our break, if that's aligned for anybody that wants to practice. And if you are emotional, really helpful, again, support network of sharing experiences as an emotional generator. It can be very healing to recognize that you're not alone. Whatever your design happens to be, obviously. But with generators, to be amongst your kind, to be understood, to be supported in your experiment is a very beautiful, fabulous gift that I wish for everybody that goes through my classes, and why I get so happy when I see people making friends and good, strong friendships being bonded over the years as I continue to watch you and observe you in your process. Okay, my friends. So much love and appreciation for you. Thank you for being here.